So we're making progress, and what we're going to look at next is hooking our form back up to our API so that we can submit our activity to edit or create. So let's head back over to VS Code. And what we want to do is we want to refactor this so that we add back in our ability to create and edit an activity. So I'm just going to copy the if statement and the logic inside the if statement from our commented code and just paste it instead of the console log. We'll just paste it inside here, and I'm just going to uncomment the code inside here. And we'll need to make a few changes. The activity ID is either going to be undefined or it's going to be the activity ID. So we don't need to check the length of this anymore inside here. And what we want to do for an activity that we're creating is simply check to see if we have an activity ID. And if we do, then we still spread the activity and we still create an ID. And we still use this new activity object to pass into our create activity method. Now we're not doing any error handling at the moment inside these activities, and if we actually take a look at the activity store for the creation of an activity, then we can find that all we're doing here is just logging out to the console. Now we already know what our server sends back in the case of a 400 error, and if I open up the agent.ts file, if we take a look at our interceptor to see what we're doing with a 400 error, then it's basically nothing at this time. So any errors that are 400 are simply going to be swallowed by our interceptor because we're not doing anything with them. And we'll see some weird problems. So let's just add a throw error. So let's, at least inside our activity store, we catch it and log out to the console if there is an error. And let's head back to our activity form. Also, what we'll do is move this logic into our activity store as well, because we now have the ability to use our history objects inside our activity store from what we did earlier. The edit activity can stay the same because we're using this activity that we create inside this particular constant. So we get our form values, and then we use this activity to create to exclude the date and time from our form values, and then we set the activity date equal to the date and time, and then it's this activity that we pass into our edit activity method. So I'm just going to copy the history.push and go back to our activity store, and in our create activity, after we've successfully run our creation of our activity and we've updated our activity registry and we've turned off the submitting flag, what we'll do then is we'll use the history.push, and I'm missing a closing parenthesis there for the activities, but I'll just use the activity ID here that we're passing into our creation method. And we also need to bring in history from our index.tsx file, and we get this rather strange looking import which will actually import our history into here. So I'll just do the same inside here for our edit activity as well, and just paste this in here and go back to our activity form, and then we can remove the then statements after the creation of activity and also for the edit activity as well. And what we can also do then is remove the commented out code here because we don't need that anymore. So let's go and take a look and make sure that we can both create an activity and edit an activity. Obviously we don't have any client-side validation at this time, but we'll come on to that soon. And first of all, I'm just going to start off with the creation of an activity. So I'm just going to say test final form and test for the description. I'll just give it a category. I'll pick a date, 12th of July at 2 p.m. and say test for the city and test for the venue. once again, because we're messing around with validation in this part, we're going to reseed our database after this section so that we've got clean data to work with. So don't worry too much about what we're sending up to the server in this case. And we find that we've got our new activity created, and this looks good. And if I click on Manage an Events, I should be able to update this and click Submit. And that looks good as well. And if I refresh this, there is one thing I want to change here, because I get the updated and persisted data here. But if I click on Manage Events, then I'm actually re-going out to my server and fetching the same events that I've already loaded to get the activity details view. So let's make a small adjustment to our code to prevent that kind of behavior, because we shouldn't need to reload this once we've already got it inside our store. And if we go back to the activity store, and let's take a look at our load activity method. All we're doing inside here is when we go out to our API, we're just setting the activity observable to the activity. But what we could also do at the same time is actually set the activity in our registry so that it's stored in memory, just in case we happen to refresh our activity details page and then decide we want to edit it. There's no need to go out and get this again. So I'm just going to copy this line, the list.activity registry sets, and just paste it below our activity here, so that once we have an activity, we set it in our registry, and then inside our form, when we are managing an event, it's going to check inside our registry to see if we have this activity, and then if we have, it's going to pass this one back, instead of reloading it again. So let's make sure that's had the desired effect. And I'll just go back to the activities and view an activity, and I'll just reload this one. And I should find that when I manage the event now, it instantly appears. And one more change while we're here is to deal with the cancel button inside here, because if I cancel this, then it takes me back to the activities. And if I'm managing an event, I would rather go back to the event than going back to the activities. But if I'm creating an activity, then on this occasion I would want to go back to the activities page. So one more small change to make, and this is back in our activity form. And in our cancel button, what we're doing at the moment is we're pushing to our activities for both circumstances. So what we can do inside here is we can check to see if we have an activity ID. And if we do, then we'll add the logic to push them back to our activity details page. So I'll just copy this into my clipboard and paste it in between the question mark and the colon. And in the case that we do have an activity ID, then we want to push them to activities. And I'll add the backticks and remove the apostrophes and say $ and activity.id. And reformat. And I should find that if I go back to my activities, I click on View, click on Manage Events, click on Cancel. Now I go back to the activity that I was on. And if I create an activity and click Cancel, then I'm going to go back to the activities page. Marvelous. And I mentioned earlier we made a small change into our agent.ts file and throwing the error. But what we're going to do is take a look at the response we get back from the server when we try and submit from our clients, and just add a small piece of error handling for the time being, so that we can catch any errors that come back from the server and display an error response if we do have a problem.